If you compare beer with bratwurst,
and cheese with wine,
or even whiskey,
with donuts,
then we think you can pair all of these delicious drinks with
murder,
conspiracies,
missing persons,
and more.
Drink with us as you feed your craving for true crime and creepy stories.
Hello, hello, hello.
Good evening.
How art thou?
I am fine. I don't know how to say that in an old Englishy way. I art fine.
I art fine. Fine here, I art. So I am very, very excited for this episode. This is one that I definitely know more about than I did the other ones. And, you know, part of that was I used to be kind of I would go down rabbit holes of conspiracy theories. I didn't necessarily believe them. I didn't go weird with it or anything. But when I discovered that there were conspiracy theories, and I had a job that allowed me to a lot of downtime that I could fill my time with this, I spent a lot of time doing that.
Yeah.
And, the one that we're going to talk about is definitely one of the biggest. It's not necessarily even conspiracy theory. It's just conspiracy.
See, and I would say it's not even conspiracy, but it is something, while it was going on, had people talked about it, everybody around there would have been like, no, you're crazy. That's a conspiracy theory.
Well, a lot of people still think that. A lot of people have no idea that this actually happened.
Interesting. See, I wasn't even
what's
into
your definition
conspiracies,
of
but I knew this was absolutely something that the CIA did.
Yeah. What's your
people?
Wouldn't you still call it conspiracy though? Because it's conspiring to do something that not everybody knows about. So it's like the way I separate conspiracy theory and something that actually, like a conspiracy theory that was proved right, is that it just becomes conspiracy of the CIA, or if it's the government doing or whoever.
Well, using that definition, this absolutely
it is. Yeah,
was
conspiracy.
Conspiracy.
So we're talking about the CIA today.
Yes.
And
my entire worldview on the CIA changed in like a fortnight.
Yeah. I remember trying to talk to you about some of this stuff way back then. This was like 10, 12 years ago. And you didn't want to have anything to do with it.
No, I believed the government. I thought they had our best interest at heart. There was no way they did underhanded things to like reach a certain end. And now I don't trust them. I don't believe them. We did an episode, I think it was our third episode, about a young woman named Annie Bjorsen. And there was a theory put out that maybe the CIA killed her because they mistook her for somebody else who had a similar name.
Yeah.
And we got so much backlash from people who are like, no way, the CIA wouldn't do that. The CIA would absolutely do that. In preparation for this episode, I just wanted to have like an overall impression of the CIA. So I read a book called Legacy of Ashes by Tim Viner. Could say Wiener.
Vina?
And the CIA was just not good at their job. They were awful.
Just bad at their job.
And in it, the author quotes George W. Bush talking about the CIA during the War on Terror. And he basically was like, no, they don't. What's his Southern accent? They don't know anything. They're basically shooting in the dark. And that's the CIA. My mind was blown. My impression is the CIA was full of grown men who thought like little boys, pretending to be spies. And then they just did what little boys would do. And it failed over and over and over.
Wow.
And Hollywood has us thinking that they're like this elite squad of intelligence, like gathering individuals. Bullshit. Not who they are.
Oh, well,
just
I can't
read
wait.
the book.
Yeah, I can't wait to get into this. Yeah, and I want to read that book too. I'm very interested in what all this book has, because I've seen you get into it, and it's fascinating. Well, to go with our story, I did some research on Central Intelligence Agency inspired drinks,
which those guys knew how to drink.
I believe it.
More than one story of them getting schnockered and just spilling state secrets.
Jeez.
Ridiculous.
I'm trying to think. Wasn't there I think maybe that was FBI. Remember that somewhat recently in the past couple of years, some agent was at a wedding party or something. He does a backflip and his gun falls out and shoots somebody.
I think that was at a bar in Denver.
It was either FBI or CIA. I think you're right. It might have been. But maybe it was FBI. Either way, I mean, maybe we got to question those guys too.
Question them all.
So back to the drink. There was a drink called CIA that stood for what was in the drink. But more onto the story we're going to talk about, which is going to be MK Ultra. Super interesting and involved a pretty fun drug. Created way back when. I'm sure you'll get into that, but we know it as more of a hippie party drug, music.
I picked my shirt for it. Never done the drug.
Enlightening. Yeah.
But I feel like this would work. Tie-dye.
I like it. I have kind of tie-dye. This is the only thing I have that's close. It is tie-dye, but it's only 2 colors, so you can barely tell. But nobody cares. Back to the drink. I went with a drink called Bartender on Acid.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And, it's not based on the CIA. But it does, have the acid part of it. And I just felt like it was fitting because it kind of combines both of what we're doing, and that's drinking and a story of acid, and how
look
it
at
was
that perfect
used.
pairing.
It was a perfect pairing for our perfectly paired with, and it actually the tiny bit about the history. It is a progeny of the surfer on acid, which I've heard of that. That came from L.A. This was a guy. I think he's in New York, based it off that, but instead of using Jägermeister, he wanted to go a different route and went with rum. And so it's a very simple drink. We've got all equal parts rum, Fernet Blanca, and pineapple juice. Mm-hmm. So it's also very weird things to mix together.
So interested in what that's going to taste like.
Yeah, anything that's like mixing Jaeger or Fernet. And Fernet, we had Jaeger on here, and I was trying to remember a drink that I thought it tasted like, and that was it. It was Fernet Blanca, which it also has a nickname of Bartender's mouthwash, I think, or something like that. Oh. Because it really it cleansed the palate. It was medicinal. It's supposed to help your stomach settle. But we, I got really into Sopranos for a little bit, and they drink Fernet in that. So I bought some Fernet. We actually had some laying around. But yeah, so I'm interested to see what this is going to taste like.
Pour it.
You could do it chilled, or there are a lot of people that like this, and they just do 1 ounce glasses. Basically, they just do a shot, and they do it at room temperature. So we're starting with that, and
I
then
don't even know what it smells like.
It's
like a candle.
Potpourri.
Well, it's got my salivary glands working.
That's probably that pineapple.
I don't even think it's a pineapple. I don't know about this.
It's not rum. Regular rum.
It's Jamaican.
Jamaican rum. I can't do that. I shouldn't even try. It's Jamaican rum.
I think it would be better chilled. We're doing it room temperature, but I think it would be better chilled.
But they do say take it as a shot if you're doing it this way. So,
but that's absurd.
We had to taste it. I'm done tasting it. I'm just gonna shoot it. It does taste medicinal. Very interested to see what it'd be. You know what I would say it tastes like? It tastes like an older school medicine when they tried making it into better flavors for kids. Like they added pineapple, but it didn't hide the medicinal part of it.
I don't know why I want to relate everything we drink to like cough drops, but this is a not delicious throat lozenge.
Yeah.
But it's my lips are numb.
Are you? I literally can taste every single one of these flavors in here. Not in like this mixed good way.
I don't know what Fortnite or whatever.
Fernet. It's like Jaeger. It's a herbal liquor.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll have to try it chilled. You should do it as a shot though. Don't let it touch your tongue.
Oh, that's much better as a shot.
Yeah, and I think you would like if
it
you
actually,
burped after, it would be lovely.
Yeah. I feel like I just freshened my breath.
Uh-huh.
Oh, I like that as a shot. That's fun. It's
well,
like
that's
taking,
what I'll do next time.
It's like I need to freshen my breath. Instead of mouthwash, I'm going to take a shot. So you get the best of both worlds. Feel good.
Feel
and
good.
So does your mouth.
Taste good.
Smell good.
Well, a drink involving acid is perfectly paired with a story about a government agency who buys up all the acid and gives it to people unwittingly.
What a start.
As the threat of Nazi expansion faded at the end of World War II, America was faced with a new enemy. This ideological threat could not be defeated with direct warfare between the United States and others. The nuclear warheads, which brought an end to the Japanese campaign of World War II, would do little to help America defeat this next global challenge. Instead, the battle between democracy and communism would be fought through exported conflicts across the globe. These series of conflicts are better referred to as the Cold War. As the United States embarked upon this new phase of global politics, the need for intelligence gathering came to the forefront of our international approach. The Central Intelligence Agency was birthed in 1947, replacing the OSS, or the Office of Strategic Services, and its purpose was just that.
Can I take a guess? If my memory serves me right, wasn't the first head of the CIA Hoover? Edgar isn't his name? Dang it.
No. So the purpose of the CIA was to gather information about global happenings, specifically focused on the Soviet Union and China and the expansion of communism, and then use that information and affect the political outcomes, specifically influence elections and regime changes in other countries, all through covert means. As the CIA inexpertly, like legit inexpertly, made moves trying to subvert communism across Asia, Europe, and South America, some disturbing stories seemingly brought to light advances being made by China, the Soviet Union, and Korea regarding mind control.
Oh, geez. I like how you said inexpertly.
They legit were just awful.
Because they were just making it up as they go.
Yes.
Didn't we have intelligence agencies or departments before that? Like
OSS gathered information during World War II.
Where they were just like, we're not doing it their way. And my guess is wanted just do their own thing. Like, we're going to do it right. And we know better.
Yes.
Yeah,
Plus,
we were
Central
created.
Intelligence Agency strikes fear a lot more than Office of Secret Service.
Yeah, OSS now to me, I don't know, sounds like a help like thing. But I know it's not, but that's just what I think of. They're like the peace, like Peace Guard, what
Peace Corps?
Peace Corps. Peace Guard would be cool.
Well,
that's like all the military, Peace Guards, because they're guarding our peace.
Yes, they are. Now, the CIA, I'm not so sure. But at this time, they became very concerned. Americans and others who fought for American interests who had been captured and spent time in the custody of these powerful communist governments while in Korea, were being released, showing signs of severe pro-communist brainwashing, at times even refusing to return to the United States or their home countries. Out of fear that this mind control technology was being developed by our Cold War foes, with the potential of it being used against Americans and the democratic belief system America championed, the CIA began its own scientific endeavor to explore mind control and its weaponization.
Wow. I think most people will be, I don't know, maybe checked out in like this is reality, and more of, all right, here we go, with, the conspiracy theory part of it.
This is all
just the
truth.
Just the words mind control.
It's
the
so weird.
Fact that the CIA and other intelligence
we're going to talk about some
operations
other
of other countries are messing with mind control. I mean, that right there tells you mind control is real. You can control somebody.
Well,
to a degree.
We're going to talk about the CIA's attempts, and then you can tell me if you think it's real or not.
Well, all right. But I've done some research. It's real. Okay, go on. Sorry.
Okay. On April 10th, 1953, Allen Dulles, then director of the CIA, gave a speech to Princeton alumni. Here is an excerpt of that speech. In the past few years, we have become accustomed to hearing much about the battle of men's minds, the war of ideologies. I wonder, however, whether we clearly perceive the magnitude of the problem, whether we realize how sinister the battle for men's minds has become in Soviet hands. We might call it, in its new form, brain warfare. 3 days later, Allen Dulles approved the beginning of MK Ultra.
Just the name sounds like a made-up name in a fiction story.
I'm going to tell you what it means in a minute. MK Ultra ran during the 1950s and 1960s. Now, MK Ultra can be better thought of as an umbrella name, as it encompassed over 150 individually funded sub-projects sponsored by MK Ultra. To begin, let's look at the genesis of MK Ultra. MK Ultra was created and run by a chemist named Sidney Gottlieb. MK indicating that the project was sponsored by the agency's technical service, and Ultra stemming from the previous use of that designation, indicating the most secret classified operations during World War II. Dr. Gottlieb wanted to seize control of people's minds, and he believed the process would require 2 steps. The first was to destroy the existing mind, and the second would be to find a way to insert a new one. The means by which this 2-step process would be attempted involved many experimental forces like electroshock or high doses of LSD. The mode for which these tests would be conducted involved covertly funding experiments through grants and bogus foundations in places like universities, research facilities, prisons, and detention centers in other countries like Japan, Germany, and the Philippines. But the genesis of the program actually has roots long before Dr. Gottlieb. In 1945, Operation Paperclip was underway, with the goal to recruit former Nazi scientists.
Yeah.
In fact, MK Ultra can be seen as a continuation of work started in Nazi and Japanese concentration camps. The CIA recruited vivisectionists, which are biologists who cut open live animals for research. And I question the use of animal.
Don't all scientists cut?
They're not
live.
alive.
Yeah, that was the part I missed there.
And torturers who worked at these camps.
Jeez.
Specifically, Nazi doctors had experimented with mescaline, which is a naturally occurring psychedelic, at the Dachau concentration camp.
Which we have a lot in America, in like the desert. Mescal. Yeah, it comes from a cactus, I believe.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's big with the Native Americans. They use it for now. Yes.
Now he's questioning himself. Well,
no, I'm correct on that.
It was those Nazi doctors who the CIA hired.
That right there.
It's never a good start when you're hiring Nazi doctors. You know what I mean?
It's so crazy.
Like, just don't.
Like
the maybe fact we should.
The U.S. goes in, kicks ass.
Yes.
Everybody defeats the Nazis. We're good. We're rolling on. We find out they're doing atrocious things.
And then some guys in dark glasses approach the doctors, and they're like, "Hi, do you mind? Let's get coffee sometime."
Do you have a job right now? Yeah. It blows my mind that we decided to bring these guys over
we did.
to the United States, protect them. Because a lot of them were on trial. They were going to be in prison for the rest of their lives. And we were like, nah, we're going to pick the best ones. And
they're with us.
Don't worry about them. They did nothing, I swear. And we picked the worst ones of them.
Jeez.
It's awful. Awful.
Yes. Then in 1951, the predecessor of MK Ultra was another project that went under the designation Project Artichoke. Its goal was to test the use of substances and their usefulness in controlling the mind and actions of test subjects. In 2018, a document outlining aspects of MK Ultra was released to the public. And this document listed 17 goals for the MK Ultra project. I'm not going to address all 17, but I do want to share some of the more interesting ones. So one goal of MK Ultra was to identify substances which will, I'm going to use the present tense because that's what the document uses, which will promote illogical thinking and impulsiveness to the point where the recipient would be discredited in public. Another goal listed was to identify materials which will prevent or counteract the intoxicating effects of alcohol. A third goal listed, identify materials which will promote the intoxicating effects of alcohol. Another goal of MK Ultra was to identify materials which will render the induction of hypnosis easier or otherwise enhance its usefulness. Again, an additional goal stated they wanted to identify physical methods of producing shock and confusion over extended periods of time and capable of surreptitious use, which means you can implement these methods secretively. Another goal was to identify substances which will alter personality structure in such a way that the tendency of the recipient to become dependent upon another person is enhanced. And a final goal I want to draw your attention to, listed, CIA wanted to identify a material which in very small amounts will make it impossible for a man to perform any physical activity whatsoever. Now, when looking at the combination of all 17 goals, historians agree the ultimate goal of MK Ultra was the creation of a Manchurian candidate through mind control.
Oh, yeah.
And do you want to describe what a Manchurian candidate is, just in case?
Sure. I know it because of a movie called Manchurian Candidate, which was a remake of like a 70s movie called Manchurian Candidate. I believe this movie starred Liv Schreiber.
I love me some Liv Schreiber. And I don't know why.
Oh, he's like, yeah, I agree. I do too. And he's not like an incredibly attractive guy, but there's just something. He's big. I don't know. He reminds me of like a good looking monster.
I find him incredibly attractive.
But why? Is it his gigantic head?
I don't know.
That's what I mean. Like, I can't.
My mind has
You
been
can
controlled.
pinpoint what makes Johnny Depp
He's
attractive.
controlling my mind right now. I don't know.
Maybe. And there was somebody else popular in it. I feel like it was like Denzel Washington or something. But
what's a Manchurian Candidate?
This episode of the Perfectly Paired With podcast is brought to you by Jason Owen of the Impact Group. You'll be hard-pressed to find a better real estate agent than Jason Owen. If you live in the Denver metro area, be sure to contact him and ask him about the special savings you could receive as a first responder or a teacher. He is out there trying to help those that help us. Contact Jason Owen at the link in the description of this podcast and ask about those savings. That's Jason Owen of the Impact Group, a division of Your Castle Real Estate. A Manchurian Candidate is someone that has been, mind control has been put on them to the point that they can trigger in a moment for them to do an action that they've implanted some way in their head. So in the movie, it's to kill a politician, I believe. But you have if you were in a Manchurian Candidate, you have no idea that any of this is in your head, that you have this ability, and it could be something like the sound of a ringtone or a certain song comes on, and then it clicks in your head, oh, I got to go do this. And you have no control to actually go to not do it.
I would give you partial credit for that response.
Well, that's the movie.
A Manchurian Candidate is a person, especially a politician, being used as a puppet by an enemy power. Oh, and then I think all the details you provided go into play there.
Yeah, but that's more of a...
the notion was that that's what the CIA wanted to create.
A puppet, I mean, I'm sure doesn't have to be mind control. You could blackmail somebody.
Yeah. If we were The Office, this is when I would look at the camera. A puppet. A politician. Being used by an enemy.
Why does that sound like all of them?
But that's what a Manchurian Candidate is.
Right. But I think their goal was to make it so that it was an unsuspecting person.
Covert means.
Yeah, like you didn't even know that you were there for that purpose.
Yes.
I will say, the only reason I'm convinced that is actually possible, I did watch a YouTube video, which I know sounds stupid when somebody starts it, but I mean, it was like an hour-long YouTube video, and it was, I think they were like psychological professional psychologists, and they went out to see if it was even possible to make somebody do this. And they literally like had somebody do an action after like a bunch of trainings just from the old Apple ringtone. I think it's the original Apple ringtone. I
absolutely believe in the susceptibility of like the human brain.
Well, you see it in hypnosis.
But let's just dive in.
Yep.
So in 1953, 6% of the CIA operating budget, which would have been about $10 million overall, was allocated without any oversight to MK Ultra in order to fund tests looking to find, and I quote, chemical, biological, and radiological means of mind control. Now, one primary drug used by MK Ultra experiments was LSD. Dr. Gottlieb arranged to spend $240,000 to purchase the world's entire supply of LSD. He's literally known as the man who brought LSD to America.
See, I always thought LSD was made in America. Interesting.
Over the course of the 2 decades MK Ultra functioned, LSD was given to unwitting CIA employees, military personnel, doctors, government agents, prostitutes, mentally ill patients, and members of the general public without knowledge or consent.
Let me say this to that. That is so fucked up.
Yes.
Because if you've taken LSD before,
I haven't.
I'm not saying you, I'm saying anybody that's listening, you know how fucked up that would be to all of a sudden be tripping balls and having no idea why. You literally would feel like you're losing your mind. You would.
So,
you have no control of it. It does what it wants with you.
I put a bet against myself that the phrase tripping balls would show up in this podcast, and I won. So yay me. And B, it also happens to be a violation of the Nuremberg Code, which is a 10-point list that outlines acceptable medical testing on humans, which arose from the Nuremberg trials, which took place after World War II.
Right. And so who they took all these scientists and
AKA against the Nuremberg Code.
CIA in the beginning already is just, we're not part of the government.
No.
We have our own rules. We don't have to abide by the rules, nor do we need to abide by the world's rules.
Correct. Now, Ken Kesey.
But really, rules are rules. They're made to be broken.
Who makes the rules? It's all arbitrary.
Exactly. It is.
Now, I'm saying his name wrong. Ken Kesey, the author of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, actually received his LSD from a CIA experiment, as well as Robert Hunter, the lyricist of the Grateful Dead. One irony that I will mention here, prior to moving into some more detailed information about exactly what MK Ultra entailed, was the ironic note that the CIA itself is responsible for creating the hippie counterculture, which arose in defiance to the control that the CIA wished to exert over humanity through LSD. They're like, we will control everybody. Bring in the LSD. And everybody was like, you won't.
No way.
It's ridiculous.
Fuck the authority.
Yes.
We're going to live our own. I now know I'm free.
It's absurd.
I love that karma. Like that.
Yeah.
Just
it's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Right.
They were like, how shall we control humanity?
Right.
And Dr. Gottlieb was like, LSD. And then humanity was like, you shan't. It's not going to happen.
Oh, that's awesome.
There is not much by means of official documentation of MK Ultra and its experiments. So trying to piece together what went on was a legit challenge for me. But let's dive in and see where this LSD-induced rabbit hole goes.
Yes, let's do it.
Now, the start of MK Ultra began rather small. It began through the dosing of single targets. Fellow CIA agents had drugs slipped into their drinks. It was through this type of experimentation that the only documented death I could find actually occurred. Frank Olson was a U.S. Army civilian. He was a biochemist and biological weapons researcher.
So he's important.
Yes. On November 18th, 1952, Dr. Gottlieb, met with a group of CIA and Army researchers at a lodge in Maryland to discuss the use of LSD. At some point through the course of the evening, 8 out of the 10 attending men, which included Frank Olson, consumed what is said to have been a small dose of a hallucinogen through a liquor drink. Now, officially, and I'm doing air quotes, the men knew they were consuming a drug, but were not privy to the specific drug they were ingesting. Days after this night on Deer Creek Lake, Olson began acting very strangely, appearing severely depressed, and so Dr. Gottlieb referred Olson for psychiatric counseling in New York. However, before Olson could attend this counseling, his symptoms worsened, and it was decided that he should be sent to a sanatorium in Rockville, Maryland instead. The night before Olson was to leave for the sanatorium, he crashed through a closed hotel window and fell 10 stories to his death.
Jeez.
Dr. Gottlieb would report the death to the CIA director, Dulles, and an investigation was ordered. In the end, Dr. Gottlieb would only receive an off-the-record admonishment.
Oh, that's crazy. Like, what the heck did they give him?
Olson's wife was initially told that her husband had died of a, quote, classified illness, end quote. But once details were released regarding his death, much later, his family became certain that he had been murdered to keep him from speaking out about the use of drugs. And in the end, they ultimately received a $750,000 settlement.
What year was this?
His death?
Yeah, that
1952. When
So-
they finally got details, I have no idea. And when they
No,
finally
but
got
I
the
was just
settlement, I
trying
have
to-
no idea.
the settlement. Oh, okay.
Nope.
But it was probably back then, so probably millions compared to now.
Oh, yes.
Jeez.
Now, one location where MK Ultra experiments took place on a larger scale was in the American prison system. According to what little information remains of MK Ultra, 3 prisons were involved in facilitating mind control experiments. Prior to becoming the boss of the Irish mob in Boston during the 70s and 80s, James Bulger, who is better known as Whitey Bulger, I think maybe he says Bulger,
Whitey Bulger.
found himself incarcerated while serving time in an Atlanta penitentiary. Bulger, what the fuck is it? Whitey Bulger.
Bulger sounds more correct, I
Okay.
think.
Bulger volunteered
Guessing.
for an experiment which was said to be testing a cure for schizophrenia. Many MK Ultra experiments offered to trade prisoners anywhere from more rec time to shorter prison sentences in exchange for participation in these scientific experiments.
That's a way to get a test subject.
Well, Whitey Bulger later described his experience as follows, and I quote, "Total loss of appetite. Hallucinating the room would change shape. Hours of paranoia and feeling violent. We experienced horrible periods of living nightmares and even blood coming from the walls. Guys turning into skeletons in front of me. I saw a camera change into the head of a dog. I felt like I was going insane."
Yeah.
End quote.
Yeah. See, that is what's going to happen when you don't know
Well,
you're on LSD, unless it's like a super low dose, because a low dose can just make you kind of feel high. Like a strong high, but high, like off of weed, but not like you smoke too much weed.
Well,
a good high. But
Bulger.
that's also knowing that you took it. I can't imagine not knowing any hallucinogen in it, not knowing what that would be like. You would feel like you're losing your mind. But they also, like, LSD is one of those drugs where, and probably most of them are this way, but you have to be in the right, like, mind place to take it to have a good trip. So, these hippies that were taking it, they all, like, expected something that they got, and they were going to make the best out of it. And even then, sometimes people would have bad trips, but not if you didn't know. You're like guaranteed you're gonna have a bad trip. I would think. Maybe not. That's my guess.
Bulger believed that he had been injected with LSD. He also would state, quote, "I was in prison for committing a crime, but they committed a greater crime on me," end quote. Universities were also places where larger scale mind control experiments were conducted. According, again, to limited resources, there were 44 American colleges or universities who facilitated such experiments. One such university was Harvard. It was at that Ivy League school that at the age of 16, a young man named Ted Kaczynski began his higher education.
We know that name.
Yes. There, under the leadership of Harvard psychologist Henry A. Murray, Ted would participate in an experiment in which he was asked to write essays expounding upon his worldviews. And then these thoughts would be picked apart while Ted and other subjects would undergo mock interrogations which harshly disparaged their ideas. While there was no evidence that drugs like LSD were ever used, the subjects were exposed to the use of a blinding spotlight and verbal abuse. Ted endured these experiments from the fall of 1959 to the spring of 1962.
Jeez.
Ted Kaczynski would go on to become better known as the Unabomber, and after corresponding with one Professor Alston Chase while in prison, Chase would speculate that Ted's involvement in this Harvard experiment did indeed play a role in Ted's actions as the Unabomber, resulting in a 17-year bombing campaign, the death of 3 individuals, and the further injuring of 23 more. Now, there are lots of factors that influenced Ted Kaczynski and his actions. However, what most scientists agree on is that this type of experimentation would have likely exacerbated Ted's schizophrenia.
Oh, man. Well, yeah, that makes sense. The dude was just mentally abused for 3 years.
Yes. He started at 16. Could you imagine? His mind's not even like developed.
Exactly.
And he's got these people ripping apart his ideologies about life.
Yeah.
It's absurd.
That's fucked up.
Yes, agreed.
And I'm guessing nobody had to, be held accountable for that.
No. Well, we'll talk about that. Now let's discuss a sub-project under MK Ultra that went by the name Operation Midnight Climax.
Boy, you put those 2 words together.
Oh, it's so absurd.
One thing I think of.
Okay. Think about it.
A brown chicken, brown cow.
George White was an agent belonging to the Federal Bureau of Narcotics. But in 1955, he found himself designing a very interesting room. On the walls of this room, he took care to hang pictures of French can-can dancers, red curtains on the window, and he made sure to include ample posters by Toulouse-Lautrec. Just French sauciness.
Yeah, it's this French porn everywhere.
Yes. White then hired a Berkeley engineering student to install bugging equipment and 2-way mirrors to this room, just oozing with what White believed to be utter sexiness. It was to be here in Berkeley, California, as well as in other quote-unquote safe houses, locations on the opposite coasts, that unsuspecting Johns would employ the services of prostitutes, unknowingly then ingest LSD, and then have their reactions watched through the 2-way mirror. The CIA thought that these men would be too embarrassed to go to the authorities to report the experimentation that took place. The prostitutes would be offered a small amount of money, as well as the promise for future protection in the likelihood that their chosen profession would one day put them in trouble with law enforcement. Now, these experiments eventually morphed from focusing on the effects of the LSD dose to exploring the idea that prostitutes could be trained and made to collect state secrets. Officials wanted to determine when would information be best extracted during a sexual encounter.
I have to hand it to him. Like, that's a good experiment. Everybody kind of wins through the whole thing too.
Well,
get to trip balls a little bit, have some sex. Like,
the answer to that question was concluded to be right after sex. So that's the best time to get information from the subject.
You're laying there on your pillow,
Operation
next to your
Midnight
mate.
Climax.
You got a cigarette in your mouth, and you're just ready to divulge. Hey,
Yes.
You want to know something?
Now, the value of the information collected from these safe houses cannot be undervalued. In the end, it seemed to be more about agent voyeurism than actual scientific knowledge. And if you don't believe me, I'll let White explain in his own words. Quote, I toiled wholeheartedly in the vineyards because it was fun, end quote. Then he went on to say, quote, where else could a red-blooded American boy lie, kill, cheat, steal, rape, and pillage with the sanction and blessing of the All-Highest, end quote. So what else was happening in those rooms, Agent White?
Whatever he wants.
Jeez Louise.
Whatever he wants. I mean, it's honestly what my mind kind of always went to from a young age, learning what the CIA is and everything is. Like,
tell us.
Well, and watching James Bond, all of them, all the time. These guys can get away with whatever they want, and then the government's just gonna cover it up, brush it under the mats.
LSD was not the only drug used during the course of the MK Ultra experiments. Heroin, morphine, temazepam, under the name MK Search, mescaline, psilocybin,
mushrooms, which is a lot harder to control.
Marijuana, alcohol, sodium pentothal, which is the truth serum, and ergine were all used to try and control minds.
Ergine?
I don't know. In some instances...
You didn't individually research
I could not.
Each of those names. You know, I'm severely disappointed in you.
Listen, I literally had a separate search bar open for stuff like that. And by this point in time, my mind hurt so bad. And at the end, you're going to know why. Because there's no freaking records. There's no way to tell this story from beginning to end. And you have all these like fragmented pieces and words that I'm unfamiliar with. And
and I know
I did my best.
You shared with me like just the work you've had to put in to figure out like, how do I condense so much information into
it's 20
such a little amount of time, which I think this is fair to tell everybody right now. This is a 2-part episode. We're not, we're not hitting it all on this. Like,
anyway,
we'll not bore you for 2 hours straight.
Before the next recording, I will look up ergine and see what it does.
I'm going to look it up.
Okay, but this is what I'm working towards. Perfect. So in some instances, subjects, which are human beings, would be connected to a barbiturate IV in one arm and an amphetamine IV into the other arm.
For us laymen?
A downer and an upper.
Barbiturate is another name for a downer.
Yes.
Barbiturate. Interesting.
Now, first, the barbiturates would be administered and the patient would fall asleep. Then the amphetamines would be released. At this point, the subject would begin to babble incoherently, and if questions were asked, occasionally useful answers could be deduced. Sometimes these experiments would take place outside of the United States. The CIA hired Scottish psychiatrist Donald Ewan Cameron. Now, Dr. Cameron was the creator of something called psychic driving. Originally, Dr. Cameron wanted to correct schizophrenia by erasing existing memories and then reprogramming the individual's psyche. From 1957 to 1964, Dr. Cameron would travel from New York to Montreal every week to conduct experiments at Allen Memorial Institute of McGill University. Over the course of so many years, this doctor would receive funds from a grant established by MK Ultra to the tune of $69,000, which would equal about $500,000 today. It's the following example, which was derived from this specific subject's, or should I say patient, because she's a human being, her medical records that I found. And it's in these records that I found some of the most horrifying evidence of what MK Ultra did, not to CIA personnel, not to military personnel, not to prisoners who agreed to exchange rec time to be a part of an experiment, but civilians who didn't know and who were unwilling participants. And it's this evidence that like legit makes me disgusted at the government, CIA, and whoever was involved. Because when we go into it, it is deplorable what happened to these people without their consent, without their knowledge. It's disgusting.